So I've been wanting to review this offset guitar specifically for quite some time now, and I'm very excited because today we're going to be taking a look at the Vintera II 70s Fender Jaguar. I have not only one, but actually two of these in the shop right now, and I'm shocked that it's taken this long for these guitars to come through the shop. But I am very excited because I've had a chance to play this and hang on to this for a bit now. A client had actually brought it to me, not for me to work on, but for me to kind of give him a critique as he is trying to practice his own setup skills. And yeah, so quickly going through a couple of specs on these. This one has an alder body, and they come in both this kind of vintage white, or like almost a buttery kind of white, as well as black finishes. Stock, these come with the original vintage threaded saddle bridge. My client had replaced it for kind of a generic Mustang bridge here. These do have a much nicer tremolo than has come on the Vintera Jaguars in the past. This one has a proper pop-in style tremolo arm, as well as just overall, in my experience, being higher quality. It's just feels much more robust, reminding me a bit actually of maybe some of those earlier patent pending Jazzmaster and Jaguar tremolo units from the late 50s to I think about 1960 or so. Now, one of the striking and also divisive features aesthetically on this guitar is the fact that this one has a maple neck with black binding and black block inlays. Now, not everybody is a fan of that. I've heard some people criticize this look strongly, thinking that it is puke worthy, but for me, I actually kind of dig it. I'm glad that they didn't do anything dumb like give it a matching headstock, because to me that definitely would look wrong personally, but I think it's a nice and unique look, and I think the colors that they chose to release this in to pair with that kind of aesthetic on the neck were good choices overall. Now, you can take a look and see that this has the 70s style Fender Jaguar logo. It's got the black text with the gold trim around it. These also came with a synthetic bone nut, as well as F-style Fender tuners, period correct, for the late 60s to 70s era. And I gotta say, with regards to these tuners, I believe they have started to make these tuners in Taiwan. I think I'd mentioned that in a previous review for a guitar, and they're just a lot smoother than they had been when they were being made in Germany for the longest time. Those kinds of German produced, I think they were Shaler made tuners, just didn't feel very good overall. And I think these ones are made by Ping and just feel a lot smoother overall. This guitar also features a 7 1/4 radius, so vintage correct again for the era, but this time, instead of vintage size frets, they decided to go with vintage tall. And in case you didn't know, vintage talls are only a little bit taller than vintage size frets. Vintage size frets are typically about 0.039 inches tall. These ones here are 0.045 inches tall, and I think that for me, it's not that big of a difference. Yes, I can feel it, and some folks are not a fan of vintage tall or narrow tall, which people people think are actually the same exact size as vintage tall, but narrow tall are actually quite a bit taller at 0.054 or 0.055 inches tall. So overall, I find the neck on this guitar very, very comfortable to play. It's got a nice gloss finish that, in my experience, at least for the chemical makeup of my sweat, does not get really sticky. The fret ends are nice and smooth, despite the fact that this one here was made in 2023, so about 2 years old now. So the one that I've got back there is also made in 2023, but does unfortunately have some noticeable fret sprout, and that can happen on cheap guitars. It can happen on really expensive guitars. As I've mentioned before in other videos, it really comes down to the environment that a guitar has kept in, and I don't know where either of these guitars have been, but maybe this one was kept in a more humidified environment, whereas the other one maybe has existed in drier environments, which causes the wood to shrink, and that's how those frets end up sprouting out of the side. Even on these ones that are bound necks, unfortunately, they do not have those nibs that cover the fret ends, like you will find like on Gibson or Epiphone guitars, or even some of the higher end custom shop Fenders. So you will undoubtedly, if that wood shrinks, feel them kind of poking out of the side. Now, my general thoughts of the Vintera line, or made in Mexico guitars in general, particularly ones that are in this higher price range. So that includes the Vintera 60s models, both Jazzmaster and Jaguar, as well as the Troy Van Leeuwen models and other higher end Mexican made guitars, is that they are really good guitars, but require a bit more attention to detail if you want them to be great. And they are close, right? One of the gripes that I have on this particular guitar, as well as the other one, is both of them do have quite a number of high spots on the frets. So the frets, unfortunately, are not level. And so when you have that, it's not obviously a complete deal breaker. You can still get the action fairly low overall, but you're not going to get them as low without them buzzing unless those frets are actually leveled. I found and tested with my Fret Guru XT fret rocker. It's my guitar tool of choice these days for checking frets, because it just does so many different things. It's the mother of all guitar tools, as Fret Guru calls it, because it's a gauge on so many different levels. But yeah, checking it with that, I did find high frets or high spots all over the fretboard, and the same goes for the other Vintera II that I've got there in the back. So keep that in mind when you get them. Perhaps maybe if you were getting one brand new, that you are not going to experience that, but perhaps over time, maybe they don't actually glue these frets in, I'm going to suspect, to save on time and also cost, especially because these are maple fingerboards, and getting glue on these, finished maple fingerboards is probably quite a bit of a headache. So yeah, they most likely are just pressing these frets in and counting on the tangs of the frets to kind of catch the wood. So over time, with that wood expanding or contracting depending on the humidity, much like with, the fret sprout, it could potentially end up pushing spots on the frets out. So moving on to the electronics, I quite like the sound of these 70s style Jaguar pickups. They definitely do sound a bit different to my ears than the Vintera 60s ones. I feel like these ones are a bit more lively. They have a bit more top end to them, but they're also quite full. I measured using my multimeter what the outputs of these are, and actually it was 6.16K on the bridge and 6.3 3K on the neck. It should be reversed. The bridge most of the time should be the hotter of the two pickups, but not that huge of a deal because they are pretty close in output overall. They are unfortunately a bit noisy, especially for Jaguar pickups. I think this guitar in particular is having some sort of a grounding issue, because when I do touch these strings or the tremolo or the control plate here, that buzzing goes away. And I think that is a common issue because I've had a number of folks reach out to me asking on how to sort it. Another thing that is unfortunate on this guitar, and I'm not sure why they made this decision, because on the Vintera 60s models, as well as the classic player models that came before that series, Fender had always shielded all of the cavities with shielding paint, and they decided on both the Jazzmaster, which I thought, you know, the Vintera II Jazzmaster doesn't have shielding, maybe because they thought that the anodized aluminum pickguard, which usually does an awesome job when combined with proper body shielding to create a really robust and nice Faraday cage effect, which helps to really minimize a lot of that 60 cycle hum that you'll get from these true single coil pickups. But on this one, the only kind of shielding that we've got is an adhesive, you know, aluminum foil kind of shielding that was stickered onto the back of the pickguard, similar again to what they've been doing on pretty much all of the made in Mexico models. But the routes themselves, the control cavities, the pickup cavities, all of that is unfortunately bare wood. So if you want to minimize that noise a bit more, I would break out that copper foil tape. Make sure you are using conductive kind, ones where, you know, you do not need to solder between the separate pieces that you are going to use, and double check to make sure that the kind that you're buying is that kind, because not all of them somehow are like that. I think because some of them use an adhesive that kind of minimizes the connection between. It's weird. But yeah, most of them, I'll drop a link down below to the kinds of shielding tape that I use. It definitely is conductive, so you can get yours from down there if you don't already have some on hand. Now, the wiring circuit on here is traditional Jaguar circuit. So you've got your independent pickup selection switches, as well as your strangle or bass cut switch here. You've got your lead, volume, and tone control, and then you've got a proper rhythm circuit, which is activated by this top switch here. And then you've got your rhythm circuit only, which is basically just the neck pickup and a darker tone overall. You've got the rhythm circuit only volume and tone roller wheels. Now, one thing that I would love to see Fender do on these models, particularly because the prices on these things are creeping up, right? A number of years ago, you were able to get a made in Mexico model for about $1,000. Now this one here is $1,569 from Fender themselves, as well as all of the retailers online. And so I would love to see them actually use cloth covered wiring. They are already using CTS pots and Switchcraft switches, which is good. Those are all great electronics, but sticking to the PVC coated wiring on here. And I wish they also had, as I said before, just proper shielding. Maybe bring back those shielding plates, or at minimum the shielding paint. But it would be nice, just because as a guitar tech, it is a nightmare, in my opinion, working with those PVC coated wires. They do not stay where you put them unless they are like taped together or zip tied together. And zip tied wires are annoying because then you have to cut them open if you're trying to do wiring mods and stuff. And also they melt really, really easily. If you slip just even a little bit with your soldering iron, you're going to end up hitting one of those, and then you've got an exposed bit of wire as soon as that plastic melts. So So yeah, that definitely is on my wish list, Fender. If you are listening, I think that would increase the value proposition overall for folks, knowing that the wiring harness underneath is robust and doesn't need to be switched out, because the electronics, as I said before, are already otherwise high quality. Now, it's not a totally wired guitars review unless I talk about the weight of the guitar. And this one here is actually fairly standard for a Jaguar, on the lighter side, even at 8.4 pounds. It doesn't feel uncomfortable to wear on a strap or even to hold in your lap. The one that I've got in the back there is quite a bit heavier at about 8 pounds, 12 ounces. So very close to 9 pounds on that one. So it's going to be a struggle probably to find one that is 8 pounds or below. We could potentially chalk it up to the quality of the alder being used on these bodies. But really, at the end of the day, I think Jags are just heavier guitars because of all of the chrome and metal plates that are on here. The fact that the routing in this body is pretty minimal overall, unlike a Jazzmaster that's got the whole control route routed out. There's just a lot more wood here on top of all of the metal plates, and so Jaguars do tend to be about an average of 8.5 pounds, you know, pushing up into the 9-pound range pretty commonly. So my thoughts on this guitar after playing it for a while is that it's a really nice guitar. Again, the neck here, despite the fact that on paper is quite thick, is just really, really comfortable in hand. I feel like it's minimized on the shoulders here as compared to the Vintera 60s model. Got a little bit flatter of a feel to the C shape on the back of the neck, so that does make it feel a bit less chunky despite the thickness that I found on here. Now, for a multitude of reasons, folks very often decide to switch out that original bridge because they hate the rattles or they don't want to deal with all of the little set screws and have to worry that they are going to, like, you know, recess into the saddles over time and mess up the radius that they've set. That obviously, as you've seen in many of my other videos before, can be addressed by a little bit of Loctite 222, the purple variant, which is my go-to choice for Loctite these days. It's very easy to adjust even if you go a little overboard with them, unlike the Loctite 242 blue variant, which if you go just a little bit too much with that stuff, good luck getting those set screws to move. It's not supposed to be a permanent type of Loctite, but with the fact that the set screws that they use in those imported vintage style bridges are not very robust. They're not very strong. They're super easy to strip even if you're using the correct size Allen key. I definitely would err on the side of caution and go for the purple Loctite instead. But in its stock configuration overall, I am pretty impressed by this model. Obviously, if you can get one used, you know, I see these going for about, you know, $900 to $1,000 all the time on the various used markets. But if you do decide to get one new, I would go for a retailer like Zzounds, who I've recently partnered up with. I'm going to be doing a lot more reviews thanks to their creator program. So thank you to Zzounds for partnering with me. I personally have used Zzounds as my go-to retailer of choice because they make it super easy for you to split up and finance your purchases with absolutely zero interest, and they give you up to, I believe, 12 months to pay it off, which makes it really great, especially if you know, like a lot of folks out there, don't have the best credit, and they don't rip you off like Affirm or Synchrony or any of those other creditors that often will apply like really, really high interest rates. So I really do as a Zzounds customer, appreciate them for that. You can get a guitar like this from them and pay it off over 12 months for $130 a month, which is a better option for a lot of folks than having to pay that $1,600 plus with the taxes included up front. Overall, do I think the Vintera II 70s Jaguar is worth it? Yes, I definitely think that this is a really, really nice Jag, even for the money, even though it is verging on quite expensive if you are buying it new. It is really nice. It is definitely a step up from the other Jags currently on the market, and is one of the only vintage style Jags that Fender is offering right now. It was a shame that the road-worn Jazzmaster came out recently. I was hoping that a road-worn 70s Jaguar was going to come out, maybe one that had a rosewood fingerboard with blocks and binding instead, but that was unfortunately a missed opportunity. Maybe Fender will announce it next year, hopefully, fingers crossed, along with the much awaited American Vintage II Jaguar that we've all been hoping Fender would release for a number of years now. But yeah, overall, I really dig this Jaguar. Again, if you get one, some minimal work can turn this already good guitar into a great guitar. You know, things like leveling the frets out and crowning them and dressing the fret ends and polishing them nicely, shielding the guitar, applying some Loctite to that stock bridge, or swapping it out for something, you know, affordable. I recently tried out the offset bridge from Offset Guitars UK. It's a $118 bridge, doesn't break the bank, but is super high quality. And unlike this cheapo Mustang bridge that's on this guy, which has a 56mm spacing that brings these strings a little too close to the edge of the fretboard for my personal preference. You know, those have 52.5mm string spacings. If you're looking for something even more budget, you can check out the bridges from Nova Custom Guitars. They have a 52mm string spacing bridge as well, in both brass saddles as well as the chrome plated steel saddles. So yeah, you've got a lot of options to improve this for not a lot of money. So yeah, I really dig and am pleased overall with the playability and feature set of the Vintera II Jaguar. And if you're in the market for one and don't want to deal with crazy tariffs from importing guitars from Japan, which had previously been my go-to, but these stupid tariffs have really put the kibosh on those, because it's a 25% tariff at this point. That's 25% on top of, you know, the taxes that you're going to pay if you're buying on places like eBay or Reverb, and that's quite a chunk of change to pay, especially because a lot of those are effectively being scalped by sellers here stateside, marking them up $1,000+ more in some cases than what they went for new. So yeah, I'd say if you are in the market for a sub $2,000 Jaguar and are looking to buy one brand new, this is pretty much all you've got. And I'm glad that at very minimum, it's a good one. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, especially if you've been on the hunt for the perfect Jaguar for you. If you haven't already, please hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell to be notified of new videos as soon as they drop. And don't forget to follow Totally Wired Guitars for more offset guitars buying tips.